Today we're talking multi-threading. So it's all about, hey, I'm working deals. I'm likely not talking to the executive buyer in the very first call. How do I think about getting to power? How do I think about using multi-threading as a way to position bigger deals? Maybe you're expanding customer accounts. And what we're going to dig into today is one, what is multi-threading and why is it important? How do we get our champions and main points of contact to introduce us to power and get more of the execs involved? And then we're going to give you super tactical multi-threading plays that we call it. So you're going to get some really actionable stuff that you can use right after this call to help you multi-thread more effectively rather in your deals. So a couple quick things before we dig in. Scott asked, and for anyone else, yes, the session is being recorded. Yes, we're going to send it out afterwards. And the other thing that would really help us too is if you have questions, either drop them into the chat or the Q&A section here in the bottom of Zoom. We would love to answer as many questions as we can. So before we dig in, I want to thank our two partners and sponsors. One, ZoomInfo. We were just talking about this before we launched. Just changed the stock ticker to GTM, which I thought was super badass. But ZoomInfo, a great solution for those that are unaware. They do a lot more than data. It's the whole GTM tech stack. And one of the things I'm especially excited about is their Copilot solution. So, I mean, it's helping leverage AI in the platform to point your effort in the right direction, focus on the right accounts, tee you up with messaging, all kinds of stuff. So make sure to check out ZoomInfo. I want to thank Mixmax. This is the sales engagement tool that I personally use that I find to be just super simple, straightforward, highly effective. And they also have an AI solution, Meeting Assistant, that they've just launched as well. That's pretty badass. So go make sure to check out Mixmax. All right, quick introductions, and then we'll dig in. Karen Hor, Enterprise Account Manager at ZoomInfo's, on the call with us today. We have Amber Smith, AVP of Enterprise Account Management at ZoomInfo. We have Heath Barnett, VP of Revenue at Mixmax. And my name's Jason. If you're just coming across our stuff for the first time, at Outbound Squad, we're all about helping you turn complete strangers into paying customers. So we do sales training for companies like Shopify, Zoom, Gong, etc. Team, you guys ready to dig in?
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm going to pose this question. Let's pose it to the audience. What percentage of deals are single-threaded? So single-threaded deal is I have one point of contact. I'm working a deal. I have one point of contact. There's actually some big studies on this. Let us know in the chat. We have everything from 19% to 85. I think Amber, Heath, Karen, I don't think that you've seen this part of the deck. What do you guys think?
As a rep, I feel like Amber should tell us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too
I feel
big
like
to
a
be
lot of the
comfortable
reporting
with.
leadership would have that, but
Yeah, I'm going. It's got to be at least 80%.
Yep.
I would say if you're SMB versus enterprise, you're gonna have a difference there. But yeah, big.
78%. It is a big study that LinkedIn did. And for the enterprise deals, what they found is that 93% of deals are not multi-threaded with more than 6 stakeholders, which, anyone selling enterprise, there's a dozen or more stakeholders. So why is this a problem? I mean, I could point to tons of data that shows something very similar to what you see on the screen. I think all of us inherently understand that, hey, the more of the right people that we get attached to a deal, that know about what's going on, that care about the problem, that want to solve it, the higher our win rates. And that's exactly what this graph represents here across hundreds of opportunities that UserGem studied. Hey, the more of the right people that we have involved, in yellow, that line there, the higher the win rate. So what I want to first talk about is the objective of multi-threading. And I think what's really important is that if you're very selfish in how you think about multi-threading with the buyer and your only goal is how can I get them to introduce me to their boss because I know it'll help me close the deal faster, you're not giving them a lot of personal motivation to socialize what you guys are talking about with the rest of the group. And I think to give you some perspective, I always like to point to these two stats. 70% of change management initiatives fail. And Gartner just did a big study and they found that 56% of B2B buyers Like if they were given the choice whether or not to buy the software again, they would have said no. They experienced buyer's regret. So the first thing I want to dig in here with our panel is this idea of, hey, don't multi-thread to win the deal, like multi-thread to de-risk the purchase for the buyer. I want to kick the first question, Amber, your way. When you think about multi-threading and how to like kind of position it, how does that kind of sit with you in terms of, hey, instead of how can I help this person introduce me to power so that I can close the deal faster, how can I get them to really see me on the same side of the table, as them, like a part of their team? How do you think about that and like the work that you've done both as a rep and then now as a leader, working with reps?
Yeah, it's almost like we have to retrain our buyers a little bit that we're not sellers. We're there to help and guide and like be a partner with them through this. And so that's how I really work with my team of like, don't be pitching product all day long. Like, no one cares about your product. So stop pitching product and start talking about use cases and that, what they're trying to do. But when it comes to multi-threading, it's just if you have a relationship with your main point of contact or a couple, they will naturally bring you into conversations with other people if you have built that kind of rapport with them where they trust you to be solving problems, not be pitching product. But I also really tell my team, like, you need to just like zoom out. And when I started at ZoomInfo, we had this metric of like 20 cold calls a day. And I told my team, like, I don't want you cold calling. If you're cold calling and you're doing something wrong, I want you to spend those 20 dials going and talking to people in your accounts and learning about those accounts. What are they doing? What are some of the challenges that they're facing? And just talk to like different levels of people within that org so you could learn more. And that will actually lead to adding value and, and multi-threading as well.
So Karen, in the deals, you're the rep on this call. Like you're the one out of all four of us here that is probably applying this most in their day to day. Like sales for me is like, it's like a part of what I do as a business owner, You're doing this every day in your deals. How do you think about getting the person to see you as a peer and someone that is there to help them?
Yep.
Like, how do you think about that from a credibility standpoint? Because the reason I asked that question is I think a lot of this is like the thing that is like not directly said or explicit, but the buyer's kind of thinking like, why would I introduce you to my boss when I have trouble getting time with him and I can just communicate the information to them. So why do I need you?
Yeah.
How do you think about that positioning?
First, it's really hard to build relationships, and people can tell if you want something out of them. So you have to be patient and genuinely curious about the person you're talking to, their roles, their responsibilities. In the back of my head, I'm like, if what they're responsible fails, how can I make sure that that's not the case, right? So a lot of bigger enterprise deals take half a year or a year, but those days that add up to the year when the deal closes is your time to multi-thread and ask each person you're talking to what they care about. Amber, I rolled up to her at ZoomInfo, and one of the things she said is every week you need to speak to a new person and learn their perspective. Because as a sales rep, we're in this unique position to talk to everybody in different departments, right? At the end of the day, everyone's siloed. So if you can have a genuine conversation and start getting these anecdotes, jot down their feedback, jot down what they care about, and all of a sudden you have like a repository of all these quotes from VPs to C-level to non-management ICs. They all have a role in growing revenue. So if I can gather 10 quotes from people that the CEO never spoke to or don't even know about, and I say, hey, like, did you know that your VP is dealing with these issues? And by the way, there's a rep who can also agree that this is an issue. You've just given value to a leader that probably never had the opportunity to see that because he's so high up and so busy doing his job leading a multi-million or multi-billion dollar business.
Dude, that's a really great perspective. Is like your job as a rep is like surfacing up all this great information that's happening at a level that this person in the C-suite, they're not there in the day-to-day and might not realize that some of these bigger problems are happening. So you're there to like kind of gather and like synthesize all of that information. That's a like amazing value to the buyer. Heath, anything to add?
Yeah, I got a couple of things because I'm going to pull it back. Like for enterprise makes complete sense, right, Karen? And the beauty of it and also the complexity is you have a little bit of time, but also is like the multi-threading is on a different level. So I'm going to talk more on the SMB mid-market side, right? Is because the market's even changed. Even if you have a 30, 45-day sales cycle, your average buying committee is like 6 people now, even in SMB. And so I think there's a couple of things of like what you said too, Amber. One is I actually want to challenge you. I don't think it's actually teaching the buyers. I think that we in sales need to accept that our buyers are actually more sophisticated than they used to be. Buyers used to come to us for education awareness. Buyers now do most of that online before they even want to talk to us. So they expect us to know our shit by the time they actually have a conversation with us. And if we don't, guess what? They're on to the next one. I think it's the most second important piece is knowing your competition. Your competition is not who's your competitors or comparators. Your competition is status quo today because there are 10 other different solutions. And within 12 months, there's going to be another 10, 20 different solutions that are doing the same thing at a different slice, right? And so I think what you hit on, Amber, is like separating ourselves from being just another vendor and actually being that strategic partner. I think the other thing we need to realize in sales is like who's actually doing the selling. We used to be able to do the selling directly to the decision maker. 9 times out of 10, that actually doesn't happen now. Our job is actually to equip our champions and our influencers to be able to go and do the internal selling to get that budget approved. And so that's where we need to change our thought process and our mentality around sales. Sales is not linear anymore. We have to be as dynamic as the buyer journey is. And I think that's really important. Where this comes down to in sales is slow down to speed up, especially like in SMB and mid market, because you have a fast sales cycle. It's easy for us to try to get past the gatekeeper or the influencer and get straight to the decision maker. But guess what? Every single one of them has a different problem, a different priority. And it's your job to actually understand what are those solvable problems from each different person and how do I line those up with the overall arching strategy and priorities of the organization. That's where the true value of multi-threading comes from, is where you can actually build the right business case that's solving everybody's problem. Because to your point, Jason, how do you de-risk it? Nobody likes to be the single person to make that decision and ask for that $50,000 budget. But when you go and you have your marketing team, your success team, or whoever, whatever stakeholders are also involved who are also voting yes, you just de-risk that deal.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about how to kind of tactically apply some of this stuff. Because we have this, okay, I want to position myself as I'm on the same side of the table as the buyer, right? I want to surface insights for them. And then also what I want to do is keep in mind, champion enablement is what I've heard that referred to. Like, how do I really equip the champion with that story? Because they're likely going to be the one that's having those backdoor Slacks and Teams conversations and like all of that kind of stuff. So the first big bucket that we want to get into is this idea of taking the lead. So let me know in the chat, give us two things. Who is your primary buyer and how many of them have you spoken with this year? Drop it into the chat for us. What is the persona, your primary buyer? How many times have you spoken with people like them this year? So if it's a controller or a VP of finance, have you spoken with 20 of those folks this year? 30, 40, 50? Let us know in the chat. Who's your primary buyer and how many of those people have you spoken with this year? Yeah, we got 20, 23. Yeah, Sharon says VPs of L&D 60-ish. So you know what's really interesting is I guarantee you those VPs of L&D, they probably haven't spoken with 70 of their peers so far this year. So you actually are more of an expert in the specific problems that your solution solves for those personas than your buyer is. So Heath mentioned this earlier. I love what you said there around like, do people look at you as a vendor or a partner? And like if buyers aren't using the word partner, by the way, in your sales conversation, that's a really big indicator of like how they think about you and like look at you, right? So if you position yourself as the partner A partner is someone who is able to advise and take the lead and make suggestions based on 70 other conversations that they've had or dozens of other rollouts. So taking the lead is about the mindset behind this. There's a couple of really simple key things that I want to go over and that we're going to go over as a team here, that some of this might be check the box, like, yeah, I'm doing this. And for some of you, you might not have really thought this through before. There's a couple different things here that I want to go over. One is reverse engineering the perfect deal. I think for enterprise, especially, like, think about like what is the sequence in which specific types of stakeholders get involved? Who are those people? Like, ideally, what does that even look like? Two, researching the buying group, and then three, what we're going to talk about is like super tactical plays that you can run. So the first thing I want to share, and then I'll kind of open this up. We're going to give this to you guys at the end of the session today. There's a multi-threading workbook here that's got all the stuff that we're going to talk about in there. It's got everything we've talked about from the objective, what we're trying to accomplish, taking the lead, etc. The first thing that is a very powerful exercise is just thinking about the people that need to get involved, who tends to be the blocker, who tends to be the economic buyer, etc. A lot of this is borrowed from MEDDIC language. So an economic buyer, that's the person, hey, they might not be signing the actual contract, but it's their budget. And I think an important differentiation, and I'll kick this first question your way, Heath, champion versus coach. Like, I think there's often a confusing, like, oh, so-and-so is my champion. And there's often like, oh, just because they've shared the most intel with me, right? How do you think about the difference between a champion versus a coach?
So I want to add one thing real quick, and then I'll answer that because I think it's a really important one, especially with the chat of like all these people, all these buyers that everybody's been able to talk to. Amber, I think you hit a great point about the phone, right? Is like cold calling is where we have this connection that like the phone is only great for cold calling. I will give everybody on this call a simple test to understand like how well do you actually have influence on your champion. To answer that question, Jason, are you a vendor or are you a partner? If you can't pick up the phone and call your champion and they answer and want to talk to you, guess what? You're a vendor. You're not a partner.
Yeah.
Right? That is my clear sign of like any deal, especially on larger deals. Like if I can't text the CRO or the VP of sales, I have not done my job of actually getting in there and putting myself as a strategic partner. So I challenge everybody on this call is like, if you have deals where you're so confident that you have your like buying committee figured out, try to call one of them. If you can't connect with them, go back to the drawing board. Back to your economic buyer and champion and coach question. I'll give you a great example with Mixmax, right? Because we sell a sales engagement solution. A coach is actually more times than not going to be the enablement side, right? Because they do have a lot, they can actually help with internal navigation. They sometimes borderline on the champion, but usually the champion is the one who actually has direct influence on that economic buyer. So meaning, someone who is like head of enablement is a great coach because they can give me more of the insights of the challenges that the reps and the managers are facing. However, the champion is most likely the VP of sales who has to go to the CEO who's the actual economic buyer. There's a quick and dirty example in my view.
Yep. It's the access piece.
Yep.
Right? It's like, do they have access to the economic buyer? Do they have the influence? It's not just the information, I think is often like really, really easy to confuse with. So I think the big takeaway here, when we send you guys home with this is like, have you mapped out what this ideal, like perfect deal looks like and the stakeholders that are involved? Karen, I'm curious for you. How do you test whether or not someone is like a willing champion? Because there's influence is one thing, but the willingness to champion you and ZoomInfo in your case is like another piece as well. What are ways that you test the champion relationships to see if this person's actually willing to go to bat?
Honestly, you just ask. Because I just ask. I just ask like, hey, obviously not on the first call, but would you be willing, who's your mentor? Who else would be interested in this? Would you be willing to broker that meeting with me? And if not with me, with another VP, another CEO, another CRO. So we do something, we do this a lot, executive alignment. because listen, I understand I'm just a rep. So so like if VP doesn't want to talk to me, that's totally fine. I have good relationships. That's another thing too. Having good internal relationships is really important because then I can directly ask my CRO or my VP or my director, like, I've got someone really interested, but I feel like I'm just not the right audience. Um, Texting is such a huge thing. I know this sounds so silly, but if I can text you and I was like, hey, yo, to a customer, to a prospect, like I know in my heart, like I've earned that trust, that they can speak openly with me too.
Yeah.
So just
Texting is
ask.
so big.
I
Yeah.
think it's
Go ahead,
key,
Amber.
Karen, too, because one of the things that when Karen builds such great relationships within her customer accounts and continues to pressure test where they are when she's cross-selling or upselling. But sometimes you can just ask like, hey, my VP wanted to connect with Susie, your VP. Like, are you okay if we broker that conversation? Because sometimes there's that I don't necessarily want to go there, but my VP was asking to chat about XYZ, and being able to facilitate that dialogue and see if they're interested in being like, oh yeah, that would be like, I've had times where they're like, yes, I think it'd be great if they like connect because like they're asking a bunch of questions and we want to build that relationship. But then there's other times when they're like, well, I don't know, and like that's a good way to test the boundaries of like, are they okay not, and VPs and above generally have, let's call it an ego, where like Karen knows way more than I do, way more than, a lot of the leadership within ZoomInfo, but being able to have that VP or CRO or, CEO title reach out to a similar title on their end oftentimes helps bring people to the table. So that is a huge thing to call out, Karen. I think we do that a lot at ZoomInfo for just testing the relationship and where we are.
You hit.
So
Oh, do you mind if I add one, Jason?
no, go ahead, Heath. Yeah, go ahead.
You hit a really good one, Amber, and it's the word of like cross-selling and upselling, right? And I think it's important because, especially like in the sales world, we need to understand that a deal at signing is not a deal won, right? Because if you don't actually have that buying committee set up, you haven't multi-threaded the deal, you're setting up Karen for failure because now she has to go and try and actually like set that account up for success. And Karen, I see you smiling because like I guarantee you when you go into like renewal conversations, you know exactly which ones like you have like you're very confident in. You know which ones that you were kind of is thrown over the wall towards you and you had to like rebuild that deal from the ground up. And so I think it's an important one because there's this shift happening in the landscape where it's not just sales and then success. It's about success before sales that will then lead to ultimate success across that customer journey. And so it's important to connect those dots because that's how we set each other up to win.
Love it. So if we think about this piece of like knowing who the buying group is, making sure that we have the right people involved, and then we're talking about the champion and like their willingness, ableness to help, etc. What is the timing of that executive to executive outreach? And I think this is a tactic that people can take away with them. How do we think about the timing of when to do that? And if we could talk tactically, like, do you ghostwrite the email for your VP to write? What does the email say? Like, how do we think about that? And Amber, let me kick that question your way. Like, how do you guys do that at ZoomInfo?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your executives have a million other things going on in their business. So the more you can streamline things like ghostwriting an email for them, the better. They're obviously going to take a look, make tweaks and, make it their own. But like the last thing that you want to do, just to like start with that, is ask them, hey, can you go do that? And then not actually help them do it and then not follow up. Like your executives are not thinking 3 days from now, did that person reply? Like, should I, hit them back up again or text them? Like your executives aren't thinking that. So like project managing your executives is also really important. But how we do it here at ZoomInfo, I think every team's a little bit different. So I can't speak to ZoomInfo as a whole. But how I do it with my team is just like we do when we look at our accounts, we do account strategy reviews on some of our larger customers and we look at the account and like, are we single threaded? where are we? Do we have, people, IC up to CEOs, C-levels in different departments, and where can we map those to? Do we have relationships with them now? Do we not? And where, like, what value and use cases are we offering? And are we solving for? And like, who's the best person within our org to map to that use case?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, our VP of marketing. Sometimes it's our, rev ops leader. Sometimes it's me. It just kind of depends on the personalities and use cases. And so we do a lot of that mapping. Number one, when we first get an account thrown over from new business, right? And so from an account management perspective, we do that when we first get a big account, when we first get an account that like looks very single threaded, we map it out. And then we also do it kind of six months in, so on and so forth, but it's a constant thing. You cannot, like, if you are on the account management side, you cannot wait until 3 to 6 months before the renewal to do this. Like, that is going to look like a Hail Mary. Like, I'm trying to save this relationship, like executives, and your executives hate that. Like, they're thinking like, you guys, you got to keep me you got to keep me involved and get me involved earlier. And so another thing that I've been really working on with our teams is just when you bring in an executive, great. How are you going to keep those executives engaged with one another over the contract period and longer, right? What are the things that you can do and like create a nurture path for them as well? So
Yeah. So Laura asked in the chat, when you say we, is that the responsibility solely of the AE or the AM, let's say? But the rep is the person when you say we, Amber,
I would
that
say
they're responsible for project managing and like the relationships,
yes.
like they own the account.
Yes, I would say that's how I view it at ZoomInfo is that AM is AEs. They're the ones that own and project manage the relationship. Now they have their support team. Like, how many calls was I on with you last year with a bunch of deals, Karen? 1 billion, right? You have your support team, but someone needs to be in the driver's seat. You can't have 5 people in the driver's seat. That's your job. Like, that's why you were hired. You have to decide where you're driving in the car. You have to have the map. You have to say, hey Amber, hey Susie, hey Bill, this is where I'm going with this account. Do you guys agree? And like, you might say, here's point A, here's where we're going. And we might say, hey, guess what, there's a landmine here, maybe we go around and take a detour or whatever. But you have your support team to help guide that project plan with you, but you are the driver for sure. And taking ownership of that, because if you're not, no one else is.
Yep.
And then you don't have a job because you didn't push your business forward.
100%. So that's one play. So we're going to give you maybe half a dozen plays here. So far what we've talked about is the importance of taking the lead. You have to take the lead in the deal. You have to be that advisor. You got to be consultative. Like, you're in the driver's seat. You have to advise them on how to get the best outcome. Second thing that we talked about was we kind of need to know how the perfect deal comes together and who needs to be involved. And Amber, you mentioned stakeholder mapping and like that sort of stuff. Like, if you aren't doing this, please, like, there's so many reps that hop on a first call. They don't even get on Sales Navigator to like put together a hypothesis of who they think might be the economic buyer. Like, if you're not doing that, that is table stakes at this point. Like, you need to do that. The next part, though, here's where we're going to get into some stuff that's like some people are really on board with, and some people are kind of like, I don't know, that feels like a lot. Let's talk about threading power in early. So, Rafi, this will sort of answer your question around how to multi-thread when maybe email is the only thing that you got to kind of work with. One of the things that we teach and suggest is if you have a product that you sell or a solution that's like pretty straightforward in terms of like, who the typical like champions would be in this and the executive stakeholders, et cetera. One of the things you can do prior to that first meeting is just sending an email out to those folks, letting them know that you're going to be having a conversation with some people on your team. So the best like kind of way to use this, so I have a template and then an example, and then I'll kind of open it up to the group here. Personally, I don't like to name drop people unless I've told them that I'm going to name drop that person. So what I would want to avoid in a conversation like this is I wouldn't say, hi, Lindsay, I'm scheduled to meet with Heath. from the enablement team this Thursday to talk about so and so, right? Before I even meet Heath. That's probably not a good thing to do. Okay. You need to have a little bit of tact. But I want Lindsay, so Lindsay in this case is their VP of sales. I want to let Lindsay know that the conversation is going to be happening. So I want to pause here just within the panel. First, we'll kind of start with this. I find this to be a really good way to prevent yourself from being single-threaded, especially with new business. But what are the thoughts on this kind of tactic of, hey, before I even engage in that first meeting, like let me let some of the senior folks know like what's going to be happening so I can start to preheat the oven, so to speak. Go ahead, Heath.
All right. I think it really depends, and I'm interested to hear from Amber and Karen as well, right? It's like me personally, I would wait until after the first meeting, just because unless you have full context, right? You might have somebody that they have a tool in place and they don't like the tool, so they're actually like open to a conversation. So there is a little bit of risk, right? Because you could have that executive buyer that you actually email, and all of a sudden they're like, "Well, wait, what is this? Is this part of our priority?" Right? And like reaching out to the enablement team, it could actually start some things. What I like to do is actually like take that first meeting to actually understand the landscape. And then what I train my team is it's about personalization versus personalization. Is like when we do reach out to that executive buyer, it's actually understanding of like, hey, here's some of the challenges I met with your team. Here's some of the challenges that they're facing. Is this like, are you aligned with this? Is this part of the challenges you're facing that's impacting, whatever your strategic initiatives are? I think that is most likely going to get potentially a response or at least internal conversations going. The only reason I say this has changed, Jason, is because the landscape has changed. The inbox is just getting way too flooded and overcrowded. And so for me, like if there is not a specific intention behind that email, save it until you have some intention behind it.
I agree in some aspects. And I also, on the account management side, think that there's a really good way to like elevate and like bring things up to the forefront. There's a couple things that I've been really pushing my team on lately, and I'm sure that they're sick of hearing about it, but coming with a point of view. And there's like, although you haven't had a call with this person yet, there's so much that you can gather through AI. Like we have Copilot at ZoomInfo that you could research like calls and just different history with an account. You can go and look at like in Copilot, for example, you can go and you can grab the information from if they're publicly traded company, like what are the business priorities last quarter, what's happening, where are they focused. And if you come in with a point of view and educated, you are not a vendor, you are a consultant, you are advising them. And so coming into this example could be something like, hey, Lindsay, I'm meeting with the enablement team on Thursday because we understand so far that, we believe that your priorities are A, B, C, or D. I don't know. If you'd like to join, like, let me know, I'll add you to the call, and or I'll keep you in the loop if you'd like me to. Otherwise, really looking forward to learning more about how we could potentially partner together. There's so many different ways you could go about that. I know with our account management team, we don't talk to the CROs all the time, as you can imagine. The CRO,
Yep.
CMO, they're oftentimes like the primary, stakeholders within the contracts, but like they're not going to spend their time talking to us. We oftentimes will just keep them appraised of our relationship. Hey, Susie, just wanted to let you know this is what we're doing within your team. This is how, what's going on. If there's anything that we can do to help you or your priorities change, let's hop on a call with our executive teams and we can connect. And so sometimes it's just keeping them appraised versus making an ask. So
I think there's a
Yeah.
combination of like, sometimes I name drop, like you should know when you can or cannot name drop, but for a strictly cold outreach, and I think the question Rafi asked about what is the best approach of multi-threading when email is the only possible way to reach the decision maker is a real struggle for a lot of us reps. So if you come in with a point of view, like Amber said, you should know your customer more than anyone, right? Or your prospect, because you've done all this work. You did a good job when the customer or prospect you're working with wants to hire you. That you know so much about what they do and their team and their struggles that they're like, wow, Karen, I thought you worked here for a second. And shit, I thought I worked here for a second. So real stuff. Like that's how I feel sometimes.
And no,
But
she's off limits, everybody.
but when you prep a VP to reach out to another VP that you can't possibly reach out to, and this is the multi-threading part where email is the only way to reach, you want to arm your internal VP. Like, Amber, these are all the things that I've learned about ABC company. This is who I want you to reach out to. This person, their role is in revenue operations. And from all these past conversations, here are the 3 quotes I got from people that work within the revenue operations team. Could you send this email that highlights these issues that I know because I spoke to these people? And then just ask them for a meeting one-on-one. And the call to action at the end of that would be, hey, like Karen's a rep on my team. She seems really closely embedded with your RevOps team too. Here are some of the things that she's been hearing. I'm in a unique position where I manage an enterprise team as well. Do you have time, 15 minutes to just bounce ideas off each other? There's a lot of customers that we help at ZoomInfo, just like you, solve for these issues that my rep Karen has been hearing about. And like, that is no longer a cold email. It's no longer a cold outreach. It's like, shit, like ZoomInfo really got their research together with a point of view.
Yep.
I can think of so many moments where I used very specific examples, and I was able to get a meeting with a CMO, a chief marketing officer, and a VP of revenue ops that just joined the team, all because I had all this information that they didn't even know about.
Well, I think you said it like really early on, is like you did the work. Like if you've never spoken to this company, like you can't, like, I don't know how big the company is, but like let's do some of the work. You got to do some of the legwork first to like make sure that you actually can provide value for that business. If you're going on and you're asking for a call with the, multi-threading and trying to get up into the business, but you haven't actually done the legwork, like you haven't earned the right to have that call, and you will be viewed as a vendor. Like they're not, like, why ruin your name? Right. I think that that is really important for people to think about. It's just being very careful about when you go and like, what is the goal? What's the intention? And do you have you done the work? Also going back to something Karen said at the end too, was, we have executive tracker here. If someone moves from one company to another, like you can actively like, oh, great, this person's in my account now. They just came from a customer. This is awesome. Like that is a good time to reach out too. You might not know much about the company. Maybe you didn't do the legwork yet, but you can say, hey, Bill, I noticed that you just were with one of our customers, and now you're with, one of my accounts. I'd love to connect with you, learn more, like see what you've uncovered, and if you think that there's an opportunity for us to work together. That's a huge use case for most of our customers, is like getting in and getting with those people often, and that helps you get multi-threaded. So like if you're not doing any kind of exec tracker with ZoomInfo or others today, like you got to do that. So that helps with multi-threading.
Spot on, Amber. And like I think the one thing that we need to realize too, especially when there's a champion change, especially like on the account management side, you and 15 or 20 other people are reaching out to that person because everybody's tracking that signal. And so that's where I think it becomes even more critical of like doing your research and actually understanding, hey, here's some of the challenges at this company. The more that you can make it actual intentional and have intentionality behind it, you're going to stand out from the other 20 people, the other 20 account managers that are just emailing them saying, hey, I saw you join a new company. So it's a really great call out, Amber.
Yep.
Yeah, I had one of our customer accounts bubble it up to me, and they're like, hey, your rep, Noah, did such a great job, reaching out to me when I first started and adding value right away. And he wasn't asking for meetings. He wasn't asking for things. He was adding value and making sure that, I was given information about the relationship. And this was a CRO that was brand new to the relationship, right? And so that was huge because he wasn't asking, he wasn't taking, he was giving information and building the relationship and, coming with a perspective and a point of view. So shout out to Noah.
Shout out Noah. All right, let's go to the next email. I think this is probably more in line with what Heath, you were talking about was, hey, after that first meeting, sending something out like this afterwards. Hey, I had a productive conversation with so-and-so. Here's what I learned. I think this part's really important. I I try to like really think of because the clients we work with, it's like, dude, I do all the sales at our company, and like we have like a trainer that helps with delivery, but I'm like really engaged throughout the entire process. And like I'm hyper conscious of like how do we make sure our champion, like we're making them look good to their boss. Like when they do something great and when we get a great outcome, like how do we make sure that we compliment them? I think that's super, super important. Um, but it's like, hey, here's what we uncovered. Compliment your champion, drop social proof, and then no ask. It's the no ask update. It's keeping them in tune. And so, Heath, you were kind of answering some of this in the chat, but how do you decide whether or not you're going to drop the name of the person that you've been speaking to into the email, and how do you kind of go about navigating that?
Yeah, so this is part of like from the previous template where I was hesitant. And Amber, you had a really good call out because I was thinking of it from a very cold call, top of the funnel sales motion. And that's what leads into this is because there's the relationship that you have to balance. Because if you do this without actually letting your champion know, you could also be killing your deal very quickly.
Yeah.
And so what I like to do is like assuming that the conversation went well, assuming that there's alignment of like what problem they're trying to solve and we can actually solve that problem. And I understand how that actually aligns with their strategic priorities. I'm going to ask the champion, right? One, I'm going to do my research. I'm not just going to say who's the right person that should be involved in this. I'm going to be like, typically in the next step of this, X, Y, and Z are involved in the conversation. It looks like that's, Joe, Sarah, and Susan. Is that right? I'm going to get confirmation first that those are the right people that need to be involved in the deal. Then I'm going to ask for permission is like, hey, I have their emails. Do you mind if I go ahead and include them in like the recap that I send after this? That's where I can then gauge of like where are they at. It's also a great way for me to understand what I call micro commitments. Because
Yeah.
if they're very hesitant on allowing me to reach out to that stakeholder, that's a red flag where I'm like, okay, wait, I got to take a step back. Where are we actually at in this process? So there's a lot that I can actually uncover when having a conversation with that influencer, that champion.
It's a way to stress test the deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because there's so much that could be going on there where maybe there's just not personal buy-in. Maybe the person doesn't have the influence that you thought that. I mean, there's just so many things that you can uncover by just like giving that nudge on the deal. Cool. We good on this one? I think there's like a series of follow-ups and like all of that stuff that you can do, but I think like keeping everyone in the loop on the conversations, super important. The next thing I want to talk about that I think is super important too is this idea of going one-to-one. And there's a template here that you can use, but it's really the principle of, especially in enterprise, like think about how many first calls you do where you're introduced to a group. And then I've been caught several times where it's like a really awesome, like it's a great logo for us. It's a head of enablement. They bring two of their enablement folks in, and it's constantly group. And I'm realizing a couple calls in, I'm like, I don't have like a champion really in this deal. Like I don't have someone that, to all of your points earlier, that I could text and call that would like help me troubleshoot this deal potentially. So going one-to-one is super important. For the group here, when you get introduced to a group for the first time in that first call, and Karen, I'll kick the question your way first. How do you figure out who might be good to split off and have one-to-one conversations with? How do you think about that during the call? Like, what are you looking for? What are some of the signs that you're
Oh,
looking for?
I do this all the time. All the
Mhm.
time. Like I the person who is the most quiet, but you look at them and they're like looking around. Like I've been in
Yeah.
calls where there's 20 people on their side and like 10 on our side. I look at every person. And the one who's the most quiet, I look at their role and I jot down, nodding head. Doesn't
Yeah.
didn't say much. The one that talks a lot, you would thank them first though. Like so I send individual emails out when necessary. I don't need to, not everyone needs to get an email from me, but the ones that participated the most, like, hey, thank you for engaging, really insightful. The ones who didn't talk the most, I'm like, hey, I noticed that you're the solutions architect on the call. A lot of what we talked about resonated with your frontline sales and marketing folks. Is there anything that, did you have any questions for us? I'm happy to connect you with another solutions architect on our side as well. So executive mapping is a thing, but also like role mapping. I do it all the time. Like I would side one-on-one. There's a reason why they were invited to the call, right? There's
Yep.
not just to sit there and look pretty. Something
Yeah.
about why they're there.
I literally called this out yesterday, Karen, in an internal meeting that we had where I looked at the call and we were strategizing. I was like, you guys, in a month we have a call with like this CTIO, like this chief technology officer. Like, is this person gonna respect any of us? Like, no offense to any of us, but is this person gonna join this call and get value out of it? Are they gonna look at it and be like, okay, there's a bunch of salespeople on this call? I was like, let's figure out who can geek out with this person and earn the respect so that person comes back again. And if we don't do that prep now, a month out, right, this person's not going to get value from the conversation, no matter what we say and the value that we add. But I so agree with that, Karen, because so many people want peer-to-peer kind of connection or role connections.
Yep.
Even prior to the call, and this is something Amber taught me as well, before a big call, your champion, that the real champion that can influence the deal, you message them days before. Hey, I know we have this big meeting with 20 people on your side in 2 days. Here's what I have ready to present. What do you think? Is everyone on this? I see no, so and so is on the call. Do they care about this? How about this person? What do they care about? I never met them, never heard about them. So your champions help buy. Like I can't like stress it enough. Like I have been in deals where there's only one person and this one person they're like, listen, you need to trust me, Karen. And you have to trust that person. And I think Heath, you said this, you have to arm um that person with so much information that when they do sell it internally, like it's because of you, the rep. You did your search, you did your job, you did your research.
And I want to add
Yeah.
one last thing too, is for everybody that's listening right now or watching this. Do not offer for like a one-on-one and then bring like 4 people to the conversation. That is the worst
Yeah.
thing to do also. That is the first thing I always check is like if we're doing more of these like technical calls or if it's like a very specific siloed problem we're trying to solve. If I see 4 of us and maybe 1 or 2 of them, automatically am like, all right, who's not making the cut? Because this is supposed to be on a personal level. This is not supposed to be like another big workshop session where it's a bunch of salespeople joining. So I think that's a really important one because that's another way where you can just kill the deal and really just make it go stagnant.
Yep. All right. Good stuff. Last thing I want to talk about that we have time for is this idea of leveraging give to gets. So I think people think of give to gets a lot during the negotiation process. Oh, hey, they asked for a discount, so I'm going to ask for a 2-year term instead of a 1-year term, type of thing. And I don't think that we think about what are the give to gets like early on, like along the way that help us get the outcome that we want. So for example, anyone selling enterprise here probably has a sales engineer that has to get involved in the deal at some point or a team of people. And we end up doing all of this free work to get the deal. I think sometimes what we don't take advantage of is that we have an opportunity there to say, hey, Karen, we're going to be doing a lot of work on our side to like build out a custom demo environment to present to you guys. The only thing that we ask is like, can you make sure Amber shows up to that call? It's really important that she sees that. We're going to do a lot of prep on our end. We just need you to bring Amber and the rest of the team. Is that something you can commit to? That can you make that happen, et cetera? Or some sort of commitment that, hey, if we do this demo and you like what you see, can we agree that the next step will be looping in Heath? So getting some sort of commitment in this give to get of like, we're going to do all of this stuff and using it as a way to help you multi-thread. I want to just kind of open this up to the panel. What are your thoughts on sort of that tactic And how could reps be thinking a little bit more strategically about the things that they need to really advance the deal and saying, hey, we're putting in a lot of work, like here's what we need in return from you. What do we think of that? And how do you think about that in the deals that you're working?
Who's going first? Karen, you want to kick it off? Or do you want me to? Okay, I'll kick it off. It's too quiet. Okay, a couple of things. I'm a big believer in this. I call them micro commitments. I think too often we focus on the macro commitment, which is like signing the deal, right? However, we have zero control over deals getting signed. Like that, we need to let that sink in sales. Like we have no control of the outcome. But what we can influence is everything that drives up to that decision. And so for me, it's every single call. When I talk about next steps, every next step is about a micro commitment. It's either asking them, hey, what is preventing you from inviting that next person to the next call? Like, are you actually going to be able to bring them to you, like to the next call? I'll give a very simple example. When I ran Uber Eats, like a micro commitment we would do after like the first call when we qualified them is like, were they willing to give us like their actual like restaurant menu? Very simple ask. But if they weren't willing to actually give that to us or like show us where that was located on their website, then we knew automatically like there's hesitation there. Like it can be the smallest things that you're asking for, but every conversation should have some type of give and get like composition because that is your sign of understanding, is this deal actually progressing forward?
Love that. Amber, Karen, how do you guys think about the give to gets like through the enterprise sales process? Like hey, we're bringing this to the table. Like, can you show up on your end? Like, what are some of the kind of give to gets early on that really like stress test the deal?
Are we gonna rock, paper, scissors this one out, Karen? Come on.
It's like, it's so tough because
It's
like
hard.
it's really hard. It's like I want it takes so much relationship building to ask the person you're talking to for a favor, even though you're doing them a favor at any point, right? Because like at the end of the day, it's your deal. They're buying from you. So yeah, give to get is like, yeah, one for one, but is it really? Because you're actually asking them. So it all goes back to the POV and the issue you're solving for. And I said this before, but like the person you're asking for the favor to give to get has to be the one whose job is on the line if the project fails. Like that's how you earn the right to ask them for a favor because what you're actually giving them is a solution to what problems they're facing in their role. So
Yeah.
where whatever that formulates to, can I get a meeting with your blah 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 because I have a solution that will make your life easier?
Yeah.
Um, if they're asking for a discount, great. Can I get your commitment that we are the vendor of choice and that you can make a decision by this date? Right. So yes, you're asking
If
them for
they're
something and
if
they're
they're
asking for
asking
you for
for a
something.
discount, great.
Right. Like I
Yeah.
don't care about a discount. You just let me, like, why are you asking for a discount? How are you tracking the ROI? What is the
Yeah.
actual return on investment that you care about? And why are you even asking about the discount? Forget the discount. We're the vendor choice. Sick. Like, let's get your commitment. You give me your commitment and I'll help you get
Yeah.
this over the line.
Well, I think to
Yeah.
your point too, Karen, right? Like if I'm going to change it from give and get to deposits and withdrawals because it's not always a one for one, as you were saying, Karen. It's not like I have to give you something in order to get something. Karen, you could be making multiple deposits across like the quarter, and then like it's okay for you to then ask for that one withdrawal, right? And so I think we have to reshape our thinking a little bit. And I think like talking about sales specifically is like no deal is the same. But that's the problem we have today is like we have a prioritization problem. Is like technology has really enabled us to be able to identify who's the right person to talk to. But then we also need to realize that our time is just as important as our customers' time. And so we have to be able to use these deposits and withdrawals to actually understand, Karen, you've got a bunch of opportunities of renewals, expansion opportunities. How do we actually prioritize that pipeline, right? And I think that's where like the deposits and withdrawals, like that's what I start to pay attention to, is like understanding like, hey, we've given this customer a lot of value, or we've actually given them a lot of things, discounts, what it might be. Now, how can we actually like, have we earned the right to ask for that withdrawal now?
I would also challenge us all to think about how we're thinking about give gets, withdrawals, deposits. And going back to something I said really early on is if you act like a sales rep, you're going to be treated like a sales rep. If you act like a consultant, if you act like you're helping them, because you are, like, no one buys anything just to buy it. Like, they're buying your solution because they need it. And so sometimes like how I would think about the sales cycle isn't, oh, they're asking me for something, let me ask for something back. It's, are they getting value from me? Yep. Are they getting value from me? Yep. Am I adding value? Am I adding value? If you cannot answer that with a yes, then you need to figure out what you can give them that adds value, because you can give and get a lot of stuff. But if none of that's valuable, if none of that adds value, then your deal's like you don't have a deal, or you're just a vendor that they buy and churn or whatever. So like when you think about this like give get scenario, I would just highly advise you guys to not one-to-one, but also just like, is it value? Because like if you're giving them tons of value, that's great. You have a good champion. Like you don't have to ask for something right now because you don't need it yet. Like, just make sure you're focused on like giving them value and getting them to want things from you and asking things that add value. Because if they're not asking for things from you that add value, then there's a challenge there as well.
Love it. Yeah, this has been great. Check the chat out. I just dropped the worksheet in there so you can make a copy of that. Make sure to grab that link before you bounce. Also, ZoomInfo, Mixmax, you guys are both hiring from what it looks like. So make sure to check out mixmax.com, zoominfo.com, careers page, like hiring for a ton of positions. So make sure to check it out. Check out their
Reach
products.
out to me directly as well on LinkedIn. Amber J. Smith.
There we go. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, panel. It's good having you
Thanks,
guys. Thanks
everyone.
everyone for the engagement. We'll see you.
Thanks,
Have a good one.
Jason.
Thank you.